This project is too easy, I said, pointing at the glowing screen where the system architecture was displayed. We've been overthinking it. These redundancies here and here, they're creating bottlenecks. I could streamline this in 3 days. Instead of the 3 months we've scheduled. The conference room fell silent. 12 pairs of eyes darted between me and Petra, our project manager. Her smile vanished as she studied me with narrowed eyes. Too easy? Petra's voice was dangerously soft. We've been developing this integration for months. The client has invested $9 million. And you think it's too easy? I nodded, unaware of the trap I'd stepped into. Yes, the solution is straightforward once you understand the underlying. That's enough, Mila. Petra stood, smoothing her gray pencil skirt. Your arrogance has been a problem since day one. This team has worked tirelessly while you've repeatedly questioned our approach without offering constructive solutions. But I am offering a solution, I protested, gesturing toward my laptop. If you look at the code structure, we don't need your ego here. Petra's voice cut through the room like a knife. You're fired. Please clean out your desk immediately. Security will escort you out. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. My colleagues stared at their laptops, unwilling to meet my eyes. Only Dev, our junior programmer, looked horrified. I should have argued, should have demanded to speak with the CTO, should have insisted they look at my solution. Instead, I smiled. As you wish, I said quietly, gathering my things. Something in my calm response made Petra's eye twitch. As security walked me to my desk, I knew exactly what would happen next. The project would collapse without my expertise, not because I was irreplaceable, no one ever is, but because I was the only one who truly understood the architectural flaw at the heart of their approach. 12 days later, my phone lit up with Petra's name. By then, the $9 million project had spectacularly imploded during the client demonstration, and she was begging me to come back. But I wasn't interested in going back. I was interested in something much more satisfying. Hey there, if you're enjoying this workplace revenge story, take a quick second to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories that'll have you cheering for the underdog. Drop a comment about the worst boss you've ever had. I bet Petra might give them competition. Now, let's get back to how this all started. My name is Mila Novikov. At 32, I'd spent a decade building a reputation as a problem solver in the tech integration space. I specialized in making incompatible systems talk to each other, a seemingly mundane specialty, until you realize that businesses lose millions when their fancy new software can't communicate with their legacy systems. I joined Hammond Digital 6 months earlier, lured by the promise of leading their biggest integration project yet. A national healthcare provider needed their patient management system to work seamlessly with their accounting, pharmacy, and insurance verification platforms. Previous attempts had failed spectacularly. We need fresh eyes. Oliver, the hiring manager, had told me. Someone who can think differently. That should have been my first warning. Companies often say they want innovation while punishing anyone who challenges the status quo. From day one, Petra made it clear that my role was to execute her vision, not question it. She had an MBA from an impressive university and 14 years at the company. What she didn't have was technical understanding of complex system integration. The timeline is aggressive, Petra explained during our first meeting. 9 months to complete all phases. The client is threatening to walk if we miss another deadline. I reviewed the specifications and immediately spotted the problem. The architecture is flawed. These systems weren't designed to communicate this way. Petra smiled tightly. We've had 3 architects review the plans. They're solid. Then why have previous attempts failed? Execution problems. Which is why we hired you. She tapped her expensive pen against her notepad. Let's focus on implementation, not reopening settled decisions. For months, I tried working within the parameters. I attended daily meetings where Petra showcased our progress to executives. I watched her take credit for insights I'd shared privately. I stayed late fixing problems that could have been avoided with a better foundation. When I raised concerns in team meetings, Petra would interject, "Let's take this offline, Mila." Those offline conversations never happened. As the deadline approached, testing revealed critical failures, data, corruption, security vulnerabilities, random system crashes. These are implementation bugs, Petra announced to the team. Mila's team needs to work weekends until they're resolved. My team, 3 junior developers who looked as exhausted as I felt, nodded dutifully. That night, I worked until 3 a.m. identifying the root cause, exactly what I'd flagged in my first week. The architecture itself was fundamentally incompatible with what they were trying to achieve. But I also discovered something else, a surprisingly simple solution. Instead of forcing direct communication between incompatible systems, we could build a lightweight translation layer, an elegant bridge that would transform data into formats each system could understand. I spent the weekend building a prototype, fueled by coffee and determination. By Monday morning, I had a working demo that proved my approach could solve their $9 million problem in a fraction of the time. That was the morning of the fateful meeting where I said those career-ending words, "This is too easy." After security escorted me out, I drove home in a strange state of calm. My apartment felt unusually quiet as I set my box of desk items on the kitchen counter. A plant, some photos, a world's okayest programmer mug given by a former colleague. My phone buzzed with messages from Dev and the other juniors. "What happened? Are you okay? This is insane." I responded to each with variations of, "I'm fine," before turning my phone off. Was I fine? I'd just lost a job paying $140,000 annually. I had savings, but not enough to be cavalier about unemployment. Yet beneath my practical concerns bubbled something unexpected. Relief. For 6 months, I'd compromised my professional integrity daily. I'd watched a deeply flawed project march toward inevitable failure, while my warnings went unheeded. 3 days passed with no contact from Hammond. I updated my resume, reached out to contacts, and tried to ignore the sinking feeling that Petra might be controlling the narrative about my departure. On day 4, Dev called from an unknown number. "They're saying you quit because you couldn't handle the pressure," he whispered. "Petra told everyone you had a breakdown during the meeting. That's not what happened." "I know, we all know. But the higher-ups are believing her version." He paused. "The system crashed again yesterday. Worse than before. They're bringing in consultants." I laughed without humor. "Good luck to them, Mila." His voice dropped further. "The client demonstration is next week. Everyone's panicking. You were right about everything." After we hung up, I sat staring at my silent phone. Part of me wanted to watch them fail. Another part, the professional who took pride in solving problems, felt genuine concern for the healthcare provider whose operations would suffer. That night, I made a decision. I opened my laptop and carefully documented my solution, the architectural changes, the translation layer, even implementation notes for the juniors. I saved it all to a USB drive. The next morning, I drove to Hammond Digital and asked the receptionist to give the drive to Dev. "Just some personal photos I forgot," I explained with a smile. 2 days later, Dev texted, "Petra rejected your solution without looking at it. Said bringing in your amateur work would compromise the project." My hands shook as I read his message. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was willful sabotage of a project that would impact patient care across hundreds of clinics. "Who else knows about this?" I texted back. "Just me and the juniors. We tried implementing some of your ideas quietly, but we can't make architectural changes without approvals." Day 8 arrived, the client demonstration. I imagined Petra in her crisp outfit, presenting slides that promised perfect functionality, while the system quietly disintegrated behind the scenes. At 2:17 p.m., my phone exploded with notifications. First from Dev, "Total disaster. System crashed during demo. Client walked out." Then from other teammates I hadn't heard from since my firing, "You were right. Everything failed." Petra's blaming the development team. At 6:45 p.m., my phone rang. The caller ID showed a name that made my heart skip. "Gabriel Herrera, Hammond Digital's CTO. Mila," he said when I answered. "We need to talk." The way Gabriel said my name, tired, almost pleading, told me everything I needed to know about the state of the project. "I'm listening," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "The demonstration was..." He paused, searching for words. "Problematic. That's one way to put it. Mila, I'll be direct. The client is threatening to pull out completely. $9 million and a 3-year relationship on the brink of collapse." His voice dropped lower. "I need to understand what happened with you and Petra." I closed my eyes, choosing my words carefully. "What did Petra tell you? That you became combative in meetings, refused to follow the project methodology, and ultimately quit when asked to be a team player." A laugh escaped before I could stop it. "Is that what she said?" I'm gathering information from all sides before making decisions. The exhaustion in his voice was palpable. "Can we meet? Off-site, if that makes you more comfortable." We agreed on a coffee shop downtown for 8 a.m. the following morning. As I hung up, a mixture of emotions swirled through me. vindication, nervousness, and something else I couldn't quite name. My phone buzzed again with a text from Dev. Petra's on the warpath, blaming everyone, especially you. Says you sabotaged the project before leaving. I stared at the message, anger rising like a tide. Sabotage? I'd spent months trying to save this project from Petra's incompetence. Sleep evaded me that night. I rehearsed what I would tell Gabriel, gathering mental evidence of Petra's mismanagement. By morning, dark circles shadowed my eyes, but my resolve was ironclad. Gabriel was already waiting when I arrived, nursing a black coffee. Unlike Petra with her polished appearance, Gabriel embraced his tech roots, slightly rumpled button-down, wild salt and pepper curls, and the perpetually distracted look of someone solving problems in his head. "Thank you for coming," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. I ordered tea and settled in, watching him carefully. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. From the beginning." For the next 30 minutes, I walked Gabriel through my 6 months at Hammond. The initial excitement, the gradual realization that Petra was out of her depth, technically, the systematic dismissal of my concerns, the growing evidence that the project architecture was fundamentally flawed. Gabriel listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions, but never interrupting my flow. When I described my simple solution, the translation layer that could save the entire project, his eyes lit with understanding. "You actually built a working prototype?" he asked. "I did, and I tried to share it, even after being fired. I sent a USB drive with the complete solution and implementation notes." Gabriel's expression darkened. "I never saw this. No one on the executive team did. Petra intercepted it, told my colleagues it was amateur work that would compromise the project." He rubbed his temples. "Mila, we need your solution. The client has given us 2 weeks to demonstrate a working system, or they walk." I took a slow sip of tea. "I don't work for Hammond anymore. We can bring you back. Same position, same salary. That's not going to work." I set down my cup. "I won't report to Petra again." "Then what do you want?" The question hung between us. What did I want? Revenge? Vindication? My job back? "I want 3 things," I finally said. "First, I work as an independent consultant, not an employee. Second, I report directly to you, with no interference from Petra. Third, my fee is triple my former salary." Gabriel didn't even blink. "Done. There's one more condition." I leaned forward. "I want full creative control over implementation. No committees, no pointless meetings. Just me and the development team working directly to solve the problem. The timeline is tight. 2 weeks is generous. I can have a working demo in 5 days if I start tomorrow." Gabriel studied me for a long moment. "You're that confident in your solution?" "I am, because unlike some people at Hammond, I actually understand what I'm doing." He extended his hand. "We have a deal. I'll have legal draw up a consulting contract today." As we shook hands, my phone buzzed with an incoming call. Petra's name flashed on the screen. Gabriel raised an eyebrow. "Aren't you going to answer that?" I declined the call with a swipe of my finger. "No need. I'll be seeing her soon enough." The next morning, I walked into Hammond Digital as a consultant rather than an employee. The receptionist, clearly briefed on my return, handed me a visitor badge and directed me to the main conference room. Inside waited Gabriel, 3 executives I recognized from my hiring process, and Petra. Her face when I walked through the door was worth every moment of unemployment I'd endured. "What is she doing here?" Petra demanded. Half rising from her seat, Gabriel cleared his throat. "Mila has been engaged as a special consultant to address the critical issues with the healthcare integration project." "That's my project," Petra said, her voice rising. "If anyone's bringing in consultants, it should be me." "Actually," Gabriel replied, sliding a folder across the table. "As of this morning, you've been reassigned to internal operations. I'll be overseeing the healthcare project directly, with Mila handling technical implementation." The blood drained from Petra's face. "You can't do that. I've managed this from the beginning. And we're now on the verge of losing our largest client," one of the executives interjected. "The board has approved this change. It's not up for discussion." Petra turned to me, eyes burning with undisguised hatred. "You engineered this. You deliberately sabotaged my project so you could swoop in as the savior." The room went silent. All eyes turned to me, waiting for my response. I could feel the weight of the moment, the opportunity to publicly humiliate the woman who had fired me, lied about me, and undermined me at every turn. Instead, I smiled and opened my laptop. "I'd like to walk everyone through the solution I've developed," I said calmly. We have a lot of work to do in the next 5 days. Petra stormed out before I finished my first slide. No one moved to stop her. For the next 5 days, I lived at Hammond Digital. Dev and the junior developers worked alongside me, their enthusiasm growing as they saw the elegant simplicity of my solution take shape. We ordered takeout, worked through nights, and gradually transformed the broken system into something functional. On day 4, Gabriel stopped by our work area, now cluttered with empty coffee cups and whiteboards filled with diagrams. "How's it going?" he asked, surveying our progress. Dev answered before I could. "It's incredible. The translation layer works exactly as Mila designed it. We've already integrated 3 of the 4 systems." Gabriel turned to me. "The client presentation is tomorrow at 2 p.m. Will you be ready?" I nodded, exhaustion and anticipation mingling in my veins. "We'll be ready." What I didn't tell him was that we were already finished. The core solution had been completed the previous night. We were now adding refinements, improving performance, strengthening security. As Gabriel turned to leave, I called after him. "Will Petra be at the presentation tomorrow?" He paused. "Do you want her to be?" I thought about it for a moment. Yes, I think she should see this. That night, as the others finally went home to shower and change before the big presentation, I stayed behind. Alone in the quiet office, I put the finishing touches on my demonstration and prepared my slides. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You won't get away with this. I built my career on this project. You've ruined everything. Petra." I stared at the message, tempted to respond, but ultimately deciding against it. Tomorrow would be response enough. At 1:30 p.m. the next day, Hammond's largest conference room, filled with executives, team members, and most importantly, representatives from the healthcare client. Gabriel introduced me simply as the technical lead who will be demonstrating our solution. As I connected my laptop to the projector, I noticed Petra slip into the back of the room, arms crossed tightly across her chest. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. "Thank you all for coming," I began, surveying the room. "Today I'll be demonstrating a working integration between your patient management system and the supporting platforms." The client representatives exchanged skeptical glances. After months of failures, their patience had clearly worn thin. "Before I begin," I continued, "I want to acknowledge that this project faced significant challenges. The solution I'm about to show you represents a complete architectural redesign completed in just 5 days. I clicked to the first slide, showing a simple diagram of my translation layer approach. The key insight was recognizing that we didn't need to force these systems to speak directly to each other. Instead, we built a lightweight translation layer that transforms data into formats each system can understand. For the next 20 minutes, I walked them through the solution, demonstrating live integration between systems that had previously failed catastrophically. With each successful demonstration, the energy in the room shifted from skepticism to cautious optimism to outright excitement. When I finished, the lead client representative, a stern woman who hadn't smiled once during my entire presentation, leaned forward. "Can we test it ourselves?" she asked. "With real scenarios?" "Absolutely," I replied, sliding my laptop toward her. "Try anything you want." For the next hour, the client team put the system through increasingly complex scenarios. Each time, the integration performed flawlessly. By the end, even the stern representative was smiling. "This is exactly what we've been asking for," she said, looking at Gabriel. "How did your team accomplish in 1 week what couldn't be done in 6 months?" Before Gabriel could answer, I spoke up. "Sometimes the simplest solutions are hardest to see when you're too close to a problem. Fresh perspectives can make all the difference." My eyes drifted to the back of the room, where Petra stood watching, her expression unreadable. As the meeting concluded with handshakes and relieved smiles, she slipped out without a word. Gabriel approached me as the room cleared. "The client is thrilled. They're not only keeping the contract, they're discussing expanding it to include their regional networks." He lowered his voice. "That would double the project value." I nodded, suddenly exhausted as the adrenaline of the presentation faded. "I'm glad it worked out." "About your consulting arrangement," Gabriel continued, "we'd like to discuss making it permanent. A new position, Technical Solutions Director, reporting directly to me." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted in the hallway. Raised voices, one of them unmistakably Petra's. Gabriel excused himself to investigate, leaving me alone with my thoughts. The solution had worked perfectly. The client was satisfied. I had been vindicated in the most public way possible. So why did victory feel so hollow? I walked into the hallway to find Petra confronting Gabriel, her voice pitched high with desperation. You can't just erase 6 months of my work, she was saying. I built this project from the ground up. I secured the client. I nearly lost us the largest contract in company history, Gabriel finished quietly. Petra, this isn't the place for this conversation. She spotted me, and her eyes narrowed. This was your plan all along, wasn't it? Undermine me at every turn. Get yourself fired to create a crisis, then swoop in as the savior. Several employees had stopped to watch the confrontation. Dev and the junior developers stood nearby, expressions uncomfortable but defiant. Petra, I said evenly, the only person who undermined you was yourself. You ignored valid technical concerns. You hid problems from leadership. You intercepted solutions that could have saved the project weeks ago. That's a lie, she snapped, but her voice wavered. Is it? Dev stepped forward, surprising everyone. Mila gave us a USB drive with her solution weeks ago. You took it and told us it was worthless without even reviewing it. Petra's face flushed. That wasn't. I was protecting the project integrity. By ensuring it would fail? Gabriel asked, his voice dangerously quiet. A heavy silence fell over the hallway. Petra looked around, seeking allies and finding none. The realization that she had lost control of the project, of the narrative, of her career trajectory, played across her face in real time. My office, Petra. Now. Gabriel's tone left no room for argument. As they walked away, the crowd dispersed, murmuring. Dev approached me with a tentative smile. That was intense, he said. What happens now? I shrugged. That's up to Gabriel and the executive team. But right now, I need some fresh air. Outside, the afternoon sun felt warm on my face. For the first time in months, I breathed easily. My phone buzzed with a text from Gabriel. When you're ready, I'd like to continue our conversation about your future with Hammond. I stared at the message, conflicting emotions churning inside me. The vindication was sweet, but something still felt unresolved. That evening, I met Gabriel at the same coffee shop where we'd struck our deal. His expression was grave as I sat down. Petra has been placed on administrative leave pending a full review of the project, he said without preamble. Her actions potentially violated company ethics policies. I nodded, unsurprised. And the project? Moving forward with you at the helm. If you'll accept the position we discussed, Technical Solutions Director, reporting directly to me, full creative control over implementation, and, he slid a paper across the table, a compensation package that reflects your value to the company. The number at the bottom of the page made my eyes widen slightly. It was nearly triple my previous salary. That's generous, I said carefully. It's necessary. Gabriel leaned forward. Mila, I've been watching you since you arrived 6 months ago. Your work has always been exceptional. The problem was never you. It was where we positioned you in the organization. I traced the rim of my coffee cup, thinking, and if I say no? Gabriel looked surprised. Why would you turn this down? Because Hammond Digital has a culture problem that goes beyond Petra, I replied. For 6 months, I raised valid concerns that were systematically ignored. Other team members saw the problems too, but the company's structure made it impossible for those concerns to reach the right people. We're addressing that. With all due respect, Gabriel, placing Petra on leave doesn't fix the underlying issues. Your management structure rewards those who tell pretty lies over those who deliver uncomfortable truths. He sat back, studying me with newfound respect. What would you propose instead? I'll complete the healthcare project as a consultant, including the expansion phase. But afterward, I want to establish my own technical consultancy. And I want Hammond Digital to be my first client. Understanding dawned in his eyes. You don't want to be an employee at all. No, the certainty in my voice surprised even me. I've learned something valuable from this experience. My greatest strength is in seeing problems clearly, without organizational blinders. I can't do that effectively from inside. Gabriel was quiet for a long moment. You know what you're giving up? The security, the benefits, the resources of a large company? I smiled. I'm gaining more than I'm losing. We spent the next hour negotiating the terms of my consultancy. By the time we finished, I had secured a 1-year contract with Hammond that would provide the financial foundation for my new business while giving me the freedom to take on other clients. As we stood to leave, Gabriel asked the question that had clearly been bothering him. Were you planning this all along? Even before Petra fired you? I considered lying, then decided against it. No, but sometimes getting pushed off a cliff teaches you that you can fly. Over the next 6 weeks, I worked with the development team to complete the healthcare project expansion. Dev became my right hand, soaking up knowledge and growing more confident daily. The client, initially skeptical, became our biggest advocate, even offering testimonials for my new consultancy website. Petra remained on administrative leave, then quietly disappeared from the company directory altogether. No announcement was made about her departure, a corporate vanishing act designed to minimize disruption. One rainy Tuesday, as I was finishing documentation for the project handover, Dev appeared at my temporary office door. "You're really leaving, aren't you?" he asked, leaning against the doorframe. "Starting my own thing," I corrected. "Actually, I wanted to talk to you about that." His eyebrows rose. "Me? I need a senior developer for my consultancy, someone who understands complex integrations and isn't afraid to speak truth to power." I smiled at his shocked expression. "Interested? Are you serious?" "Yes, absolutely yes." "Good, because I've already negotiated with Gabriel to bring you on. 30% salary increase, more flexible hours, and equity in the new company." Dev's face lit up, then suddenly turned serious. "Wait, did you plan this too? Taking me with you?" I laughed. "Let's just say I recognize talent when I see it. And loyalty." That afternoon, I cleaned out my temporary workspace for the second time. As I was leaving, Gabriel met me at the elevator. "Your final invoice has been approved," he said, "including the performance bonus." "Thank you. I also wanted to give you this." He handed me an envelope. "It's a letter of recommendation for your new venture. I've already sent copies to my contacts at 3 companies who might benefit from your services." I was genuinely touched. "That's extremely generous." "It's self-serving," he admitted with a small smile. "The better you do, the more Hammond benefits from our ongoing relationship." As the elevator doors opened, he added, "Oh, and one more thing. The board conducted a full review of the healthcare project. They found emails showing Petra had been warned about the architectural flaws by multiple team members, including you. She deliberately concealed those warnings to protect her promotion track." I stepped into the elevator, turning to face him. And they've implemented a new technical review process that bypasses middle management for critical concerns. They're calling it the Mila Protocol. The doors began to close, but I held them open with one hand. "Gabriel, may I ask you something? That day in the coffee shop, when I told you I could fix the project in 5 days, did you believe me?" He considered the question. "I believed you believed it. That was enough to take the chance." I nodded, releasing the door. "That's the difference between you and Petra. You were willing to listen." 3 months later, Novikov Solutions had 5 clients, including Hammond Digital, and a growing reputation for solving impossible integration problems. Dev had brought 2 of his junior colleagues aboard, and we'd moved into modest but functional offices downtown. I was reviewing a potential new client proposal when my phone rang with an unknown number. "Mila Novikov," I answered. "Miss Novikov, my name is Tara Wilson. I'm the CIO at Meridian Health Systems." I straightened in my chair. Meridian was one of the largest healthcare providers in the country, exactly the type of client I hoped to attract. "How can I help you, Miss Wilson?" "We're having integration issues with our patient management system. Your name was suggested by several sources, one quite insistent source, actually." "Oh? Who was that?" "Petra Crane. She's our new project manager." My breath caught. "Petra works for you?" "Started about a month ago. Came highly recommended from her previous position." There was a pause. "Is there a problem?" I leaned back in my chair, mind racing. Petra had landed at Meridian, with a falsified recommendation, no doubt, and was now facing the same technical challenges that had been her undoing at Hammond. And she had recommended me. "Miss Wilson, I'm very familiar with these integration challenges," I said carefully. "In fact, I recently completed a similar project for another healthcare provider." "Excellent. Could we schedule a meeting next week to discuss your approach?" "Of course. But I should mention, I'd need to work directly with your technical team, and I'd report my findings directly to you, not through project management." "May I ask why?" I thought about Petra, her ambition, her technical blindness, her willingness to sacrifice others to protect herself. And now she had recommended me, knowing I would discover the issues at Meridian. Was it surrender? Sabotage? Or had she actually learned something? "Let's just say it ensures the most efficient communication," I replied. "And Miss Wilson, please tell Petra I look forward to working with her again." As I hung up, I couldn't help but smile. Perhaps this was the real revenge, not destroying Petra's career, but being so undeniably good at what I do that even my enemies became reluctant allies. Dev poked his head into my office. New client? Potentially. A big one. I spun my chair to face him. With an interesting complication. The best ones always have those. He grinned. That's why they need us. That night, as I updated our company's project board with the potential new client, my phone buzzed with a text from the same unknown number Petra had used months ago. This one really is too hard, don't let me down. I stared at the message for a long moment before typing my reply. Nothing is too hard. Some things are just too important to get wrong. If you've enjoyed watching Mila's journey from fired employee to successful business owner, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about turning setbacks into comebacks. Have you ever had someone who tried to hold you back actually become the reason for your success? Share your experience in the comments. Sometimes our greatest obstacles become our greatest opportunities. Until next time, remember that the best revenge isn't just success, it's success so undeniable that even your enemies can't ignore it. The air conditioning sputtered to silence at 8:17 p.m. I wiped sweat from my forehead, grateful for the quiet after a 14-hour workday. My fingers continued tapping code improvements to the network security protocols, a thankless job no one understood but everyone depended on. Then the voices drifted through the thin wall of the executive conference room. I hadn't realized anyone else was still here. She noticed the pattern again, said a voice I recognized as Ryland, our CFO. Third time she's flagged those pension fund movements, getting too close to the actual destination. I froze, fingers hovering above my keyboard. Martina built this entire infrastructure, replied Chairman Lennox, his distinctive baritone unmistakable. But she doesn't need to know what's in the basement, so to speak. My name in their mouths made my skin crawl. Agreed, Ryland said. Terminate her Friday, effective immediately. My stomach contracted into a tight knot. 6 years of my life. 6 years building their digital empire from nothing. Can you imagine her face when we tell her? That was Wyatt, the HR director. That panicked expression she always gets when she's cornered. Remember how she looked at the budget meeting when we shot down her raise request? Absolutely priceless. Their laughter slithered through the wall. Blood rushed to my face, hot and pulsing. She actually believed she'd get compensated fairly, Lennox added between chuckles. As if building our entire digital infrastructure warrants more than entry-level compensation. She should be grateful we gave her the opportunity, said Ryland. Women in tech are a dime a dozen these days. More laughter. Make sure IT is ready to lock her out instantly, Lennox continued. I want her credentials revoked before her ass leaves that chair. She's too smart to leave any access. What about the systems? Ryland asked. Who'll maintain them? That consultant. What's his name? Braxton? He's been shadowing her work. Says he can handle it for triple her salary. Worth every penny if it means we sleep better at night. My hands began to shake. I bit my lower lip until I tasted copper. 6 years watching them take credit for my innovations while systemically denying my advancement. 6 years building something that had grown too valuable, too essential, while remaining too female, too ethnic, too difficult to be properly compensated. What they didn't understand about the elegant system connecting their 16 global offices. It relied on a proprietary authentication protocol I'd designed from scratch. Every 60 hours, it required my unique key signature or would revert to its baseline state, a safeguard I'd implemented after they blamed me for their last accounting adjustment that wiped out 3 days of global transactions. A protective measure they'd mocked as hysterical and excessive. A measure that had saved their entire operation twice already. I closed my laptop silently, gathering my things as their conversation shifted to golf scores and vacation homes. These men had no idea what they'd just done. No idea at all. Wednesday morning brought unusual attention. Owen, the chief technology officer, hovered near my workspace as I methodically reviewed code. Making progress on that security update? The board suddenly wants a status report on your server work, he said, eyes scanning my screen. Almost complete. I lied, fingers perfectly steady despite my racing heart. His gaze crawled over my monitor. We should discuss knowledge transfer soon. You're too integral to our operations to have everything in your head. Happy to document whatever you need, I said with a practiced smile. That evening, I returned to an empty building. I didn't sabotage anything. That would be too obvious, too traceable. Instead, I created something elegant, a transparent bridge that would activate once my authentication key went inactive for exactly 47 hours. Not destruction, but revelation. A pathway that would direct their executive communications straight into governmental oversight channels. Thursday morning, the suspicions grew. During lunch, Asher, the IT director, appeared beside my desk without warning. Pulling long hours lately, he observed. Everything. Running smoothly? Rock solid, I answered, watching him study my face for reactions. The access patterns seem unusual. Data routing pathways have shifted since Monday. My pulse quickened. Had he noticed? Performance tuning, I explained calmly, reducing latency between departments. Technical enough to sound legitimate, vague enough to mean nothing. He nodded slowly. Just make sure any changes are approved. I can do that. That afternoon, 3 unfamiliar tech specialists arrived. They circled my workspace like vultures, whispering with executives. I verified my countdown sequence was undetectable, buried beneath legitimate security protocols. Friday morning, Lennox himself stopped by, unprecedented in all my years. Heard you've been putting in extra hours, he said, leaning against my desk with forced casualness. Dedication like yours deserves recognition. Just doing my job, I replied, meeting his artificial smile with my own. At 4:15, I watched the executive team assemble. At 4:28, I quietly activated an irreversible sequence timer. At 4:30, I entered the boardroom when summoned. Wyatt began the termination with practiced solemnity. Due to organizational restructuring, we must make immediate staff reductions. I remained silent, denying them the satisfaction of my distress. Your system credentials, Owen demanded, thrusting a form across the table. Now, I surrendered my primary password but forgot to include the authentication key that maintained their precious partitioning. Any questions? Lennox asked, visibly unsettled by my composure. Just one, I replied. When did you realize I was the only one who truly understood how your systems worked? Their smug expressions faltered. Security walked me out as I counted hours in my head. Not 24, not 36, but exactly 47 hours until my absence triggered the protocol. Before we continue further with what happened next, thank you for staying with me through this journey. If you're enjoying this story of corporate betrayal and what happens when powerful men underestimate the wrong woman, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories like this. Your comments mean everything. They let me know what resonates with you. Now, let's get back to what happened after I was escorted from the building that Friday afternoon. My name is Martina Ellis. I'm 34 years old, with degrees in computer engineering and network security. I grew up as the only girl in a house with 4 brothers, which taught me 2 critical lessons: how to stand my ground and how to hide my tracks. Both skills served me well throughout my career in male-dominated tech spaces. 6 years ago, I joined what was then a struggling financial services firm. Their digital infrastructure was a disaster. Outdated systems cobbled together through 3 hasty acquisitions, security vulnerabilities throughout, and integration problems causing weekly outages. I rebuilt everything from scratch, working nights and weekends while the executives took long lunches and longer vacations. The system I designed became the company's most valuable asset, a proprietary integration platform that seamlessly connected global offices while providing real-time financial tracking that competitors couldn't match. Client acquisition tripled, revenue quadrupled. The executive team received massive bonuses and bought vacation homes. I received a modest performance review, a 2% raise, and a company mug. When I approached Lennox about advancement opportunities, he explained that I lacked executive presence and suggested I smile more in meetings. When I proposed a technical advancement track, Ryland explained budget constraints while wearing his new Patek Philippe watch. Then came the pension fund irregularities. While updating security protocols, I noticed unusual transaction patterns, large sums moving through a series of accounts before disappearing off our tracking systems. I flagged it once, and Ryland explained it as standard financial management. I flagged it twice, and Owen suggested I focus on my assigned tasks. The third time, I documented the pattern more thoroughly, and now I knew where that had gotten me. Saturday passed peacefully as I hiked mountain trails, letting nature wash away the corporate toxicity. Sunday morning, I turned my phone back on to find 10 missed calls, 15 urgent texts, and 3 increasingly desperate voice messages from the executive team. Their final voicemail came from Lennox himself. "Martina, whatever's happening with the systems, we can make it right. Name your price. Call me immediately." Too late. The 47-hour window would close at 3:15 p.m. morning, would bring their reckoning. I hadn't leaked data. I hadn't planted false information. I'd simply removed the artificial barriers I'd built, allowing their own words, their own schemes, their own manipulations to flow directly into regulatory oversight systems. By Monday's opening bell, 8 executives would face federal questioning about the $220 million in diverted pension funds they'd hidden. By noon, trading would halt as their internal messages detailing exactly how they'd falsified financial statements flowed directly to the SEC. The system wasn't broken. It was finally working exactly as justice demanded. At 2:30 p.m. Sunday, Ryland appeared at my apartment door, something I never thought possible. "How did you find me?" I asked, not inviting him in. "Please," he said, desperation replacing his usual arrogance. "The systems are behaving strangely. Authentication failures, weird routing patterns. Braxton can't figure it out." I leaned against the doorframe. "That's unfortunate. We'll double your salary, triple it. Just come in and fix whatever's happening." Outside, dark clouds gathered, matching my mood. "You fired me, remember? With security escort and everything." "A misunderstanding," he insisted, sweat beading on his forehead. Lennox spoke hastily. "We need you." For a moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. "It's too late," I said simply. His face darkened. "What did you do to our systems?" "Nothing they weren't designed to do." Ryland's expression shifted from desperate to threatening. "You don't understand what you're messing with. This goes higher than you know." "I understand perfectly," I replied. "I designed every bite of that system." "Listen carefully," he said, lowering his voice. "There are people invested in our operation who don't appreciate disruptions. People who can make someone like you disappear without questions." The implied threat hung between us. I felt a chill despite the summer heat. "Are you threatening me, Ryland?" I asked quietly. He straightened his expensive jacket. "I'm giving you one chance to save yourself. Come in now, fix whatever you've done, and we can pretend this never happened." "I'd need access to all systems," I said, watching his reaction carefully. Relief flooded his face. "Absolutely. Full admin rights. Whatever you need." I pretended to consider his offer. "I'll need time to get ready." "No time," he snapped. "Car's waiting downstairs." I grabbed my bag, deliberately leaving my laptop behind. As we rode the elevator down, Ryland made 3 calls, telling each person that I was cooperating. The black SUV waiting outside had tinted windows, and a driver who never turned to look at us. "The board's assembled," Ryland said as we drove. "Everyone's waiting." On a Sunday afternoon? I'm flattered. He didn't respond, just tapped frantically on his phone. When we arrived at the gleaming office tower, Braxton met us at the elevator, a man I'd only glimpsed briefly shadowing my work the past month. Tall, conventionally handsome, with the unearned confidence of mediocre men everywhere. "Thank God," he said when he saw me. "The routing tables are rewriting themselves. Authentication protocols are failing. Everything's going haywire." I merely nodded. "Show me." The executive boardroom had transformed into crisis headquarters. Laptops covered the polished table, cables snaking everywhere. Lennox paced while barking into his phone. Owen hovered over 3 IT specialists who looked close to tears. Everyone fell silent when I entered. "Martina," Lennox said, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you for coming. Whatever's happening, we'll make it right." I checked my watch. 3:07 p.m. 8 minutes until the authentication key required renewal, a deadline they didn't know existed. "Let me see what's happening," I said, sliding into a chair. They gave me access to a workstation. I typed commands slowly, watching system diagnostics while the executives hovered behind me. The protocols were exactly as I'd designed, counting down to the moment when the barriers would dissolve. "Well?" Owen demanded after 3 minutes of silence. "What's wrong with it?" "Nothing's wrong," I said calmly. "The system is behaving exactly as designed." "Then why is everything failing?" Braxton asked, peering at my screen. "It's not failing. It's resetting to its natural state." Lennox pushed forward. "What does that mean?" "Speak plainly." I checked my watch again. 3:12 p. p.m. It means in about 3 minutes, all internal communications from the executive level will begin routing externally as well as internally. The room went silent. What communications? Ryland asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. All of them. Every email, message, and voice transcript from the executive suite for the past 6 months. I stood up from the computer, including discussions about pension fund diversion. Lennox's face drained of color. You can't. I already did. I cut him off. The authentication protocol requires my key signature every 60 hours. I shortened it to 47 after termination, knowing you wouldn't discover the discrepancy in time. Stop it, Owen commanded. Now. I can't, I said truthfully. It's irreversible once initiated. Even if I wanted to help, which I don't. Braxton pushed me aside and began typing frantically. There must be an override. There isn't, I said. I designed it that way after you blamed me for your last accounting adjustment. Ryland grabbed my arm. Listen to me. Fix this, and we'll give you anything. Board position. Name your salary. I pulled away from his grip. You should have thought of that before you decided I was disposable. 3:14 p.m. The executives began shouting over each other. Pull the servers offline. We can't shut down global operations. Call legal. Destroy the hard drives. I walked toward the door, but 2 security guards blocked my exit. You're not going anywhere, Lennox said, voice quivering with rage. Not until you stop this. That's kidnapping, I pointed out calmly. It's national security, he countered. What you're doing is terrorism. I laughed, actually laughed. Exposing your financial crimes isn't terrorism. It's whistleblowing. 3:15 p.m. My phone vibrated in my pocket. The countdown had reached 0. Alarms began blaring from multiple computers. Red warnings flashed across screens. Braxton cursed loudly. What's happening? Lennox demanded. Authentication failure, Braxton read from his screen. Protocols reverting to baseline. Partition walls dissolving. English, Ryland shouted. I answered for him. It means your secrets aren't secret anymore. The next 4 hours were chaos. IT specialists cycled through increasingly desperate measures, while executives pulled me into interrogation after interrogation. None of it mattered. The system now operated as originally designed, without the artificial barriers I'd created to protect their compartmentalized information. By 7 p.m., the first regulatory flags had appeared. Automated systems at financial oversight agencies detected unusual data patterns, the very pension fund movements I'd flagged 3 times. At 8 p.m., Lennox received a call that drained the remaining color from his face. The SEC has questions about our pension management, he told the room, after hanging up. They've received concerning information. All eyes turned to me. I told you, I said calmly. I didn't leak anything. Your own communications did. That night, they kept me in the building against my will. 2 security guards outside the glass-walled conference room, where I sat for hours. They brought in lawyers who alternated between threatening federal charges and offering millions in hush money. None of it mattered. The system continued its methodical exposure of 6 months of executive communications. Past midnight, Lennox entered alone, looking decades older than he had the morning before. You don't understand what you've done, he said, slumping into a chair across from me. I understand perfectly. There are people involved in this who won't just accept exposure. Dangerous people. Then you shouldn't have involved them in pension fraud, I replied. He rubbed his face. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. We needed liquidity during the pandemic. The plan was to replace the funds once markets stabilized. Tell that to the retirees who depend on those pensions. We were protecting jobs. You were protecting bonuses. I corrected. I saw the compensation packages approved the same week you diverted the first 40 million. His expression darkened. You think you're clever, a hero exposing corruption, but you're just a vindictive woman who couldn't handle rejection. I leaned forward. Rejection? You stole my work for years, took credit for my innovations, paid me a fraction of my worth, then planned to discard me because I noticed your crimes. This isn't about rejection. It's about justice. They'll come for you too, he warned. You built these systems. You're complicit. No, I shook my head. I have dated, time-stamped reports flagging these issues 3 separate times. Reports you ignored or suppressed. I'm protected under whistleblower statutes. Around 2 a.m., they finally let me leave, realizing holding me would only add kidnapping to their growing legal problems. I slept dreamlessly that night, exhausted but at peace for the first time in years. Monday morning arrived with breaking news. Trading had been halted on the company's stock pending regulatory investigation. By noon, federal agents swarmed the office building. By evening, 8 executives, including Lennox and Ryland, had been escorted from the premises for questioning. I watched it unfold from my apartment, fielding calls from regulatory agencies who wanted my testimony. Each call confirmed what I already knew. The evidence was overwhelming and irrefutable. The executives' own words, preserved in their messages to each other, provided all the proof needed. Tuesday brought unexpected visitors, representatives from the pension fund's beneficiaries, thousands of employees and retirees whose futures had nearly been stolen. "They're calling you a hero," said Jenny, a retiree who'd worked 30 years at the company before Lennox took over. "You saved our livelihoods." I hadn't expected this. The human faces of those I'd protected without realizing. It hit me harder than anything else, seeing gratitude in the eyes of people who'd nearly lost everything. Wednesday morning, my phone rang with an unknown number. "Martina Ellis?" a deep voice asked, when I answered. "Speaking. My name is Director Hollister, Federal Financial Crimes Task Force. We need to talk about your former employer." My heart raced. Was I in trouble after all? "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "Not on the phone," he replied. "A car will pick you up in 30 minutes. Bring any supporting documentation you have." The black government vehicle arrived precisely on time. The agents inside were professional but tight-lipped, driving me to a nondescript federal building downtown. Director Hollister was a stern-faced woman in her 50s with calculating eyes that seemed to see right through me. "Miss Ellis," she said once we were seated in a conference room, "you've uncovered one of the largest pension fraud schemes we've seen in a decade. But we need to understand exactly how you did it." For the next 3 hours, I walked them through the system architecture, the authentication protocols, and how the partitioning had been designed. I explained each safeguard and how, when removed, the executives' communications naturally flowed into regulatory oversight channels. "So you didn't technically leak anything," she clarified. "You simply removed artificial barriers that were hiding information." "Correct. The system reverted to its natural state." She studied me for a long moment. "Clever, almost too clever, which raises questions about your own culpability." My mouth went dry. I flagged the irregularities 3 times. "So you've said, but we only have your word for that." Had I miscalculated? Was I about to become the scapegoat, after all? Director Hollister slid a folder across the table. "Open it." Inside were printouts of my 3 flagged reports, complete with timestamps and recipient acknowledgements. "Where did you get these?" I asked, stunned. "Your authentication protocol reset didn't just expose their communications. It also restored access to suppressed internal reports, including these. Reports that executives deliberately buried." She almost smiled. "You've been more thoroughly vindicated than you realized." Relief flooded through me. "What happens now?" "Now," she said, closing the folder. "We'd like to offer you a job." I blinked at Director Hollister, unsure if I'd heard her correctly. "A job? The Financial Crimes Task Force needs people who understand how these systems work from the inside. People who can recognize patterns others miss." She leaned forward. "People with your particular skill set and moral compass." "I'm not law enforcement," I said cautiously. "No, you're something more valuable. A systems architect who understands both the technical and human vulnerabilities in financial networks." She slid a business card across the table. "Think about it. We offer competitive compensation and the satisfaction of stopping people like Lennox before they can do real damage." I pocketed the card, mind spinning with possibilities I hadn't considered. As I left the federal building, my phone buzzed with a notification. Breaking news. The company's stock had plummeted 68% since trading resumed. The pension fund story had broken wide open, with financial networks running special reports on one of the largest attempted pension thefts in corporate history. That evening, my doorbell rang. A courier handed me a certified letter, a preliminary lawsuit naming me as a defendant, alongside the executives. The company's board was scrambling to distance themselves, attempting to frame me as a disgruntled employee who had participated in the scheme. My stomach dropped. Had I underestimated how far they would go to protect themselves? I called Director Hollister immediately. "We expected this," she said calmly. "Standard corporate defense strategy. Spread the blame as widely as possible." "Don't worry, Miss Ellis. The evidence speaks for itself. But legal battles could drag on for years, I said, panic rising in my throat. I can't afford. Check your email, she interrupted. The Whistleblower Protection Office has already filed counter-motions. You'll also find contact information for 3 attorneys who specialize in these cases. They're expecting your call. True to her word, my inbox contained everything she'd promised. One email stood out, a message from the Justice Department confirming my protected status as a whistleblower, effectively shielding me from corporate retaliation. Over the next 2 weeks, the situation evolved with dizzying speed. Lennox, Ryland, Owen, and 3 other executives were arrested on multiple charges, including wire fraud, pension theft, and obstruction of justice. The company announced a comprehensive reorganization as its stock continued to plummet. Meanwhile, I received an unexpected offer from the Pension Fund's Trustee Board, a consulting position to rebuild the company's systems with proper oversight and transparency. The salary was triple what I'd made before. We need someone who understands both the technical landscape and the ethical imperatives, explained Trustee Daniels during our meeting. Someone the employees and retirees trust. I considered both offers carefully. The federal position offered the chance to catch other corporate criminals. The trustee position meant rebuilding something broken into something better. 3 weeks after that fateful Friday termination, I sat in a cafe across from my former workplace, watching employees enter through the revolving doors. Many faces looked uncertain, worried about their futures now that the leadership had imploded. My phone rang. Jenny, the retiree who'd thanked me. Have you seen the news? She asked without preamble. I hadn't. She directed me to a financial news site where the headline made my coffee go cold. Former CFO found dead in apparent suicide as pension fraud investigation widens. Ryland. I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Shock, sadness, but not guilt. His choices had led to his end, not mine. There's more, Jenny continued. They've discovered offshore accounts. The money trail leads to 3 other companies with the same leadership structure. This wasn't isolated. It was systematic. The investigation had expanded beyond anything I'd imagined. My simple act of removing digital barriers had uncovered an entire network of corporate theft spanning multiple companies and countries. That afternoon, I received another unexpected call from Braxton, the consultant who'd been shadowing my work. Can we meet? He asked, voice tense. There are things you should know. We arranged to meet at a public park. Braxton looked terrible, unshaven, eyes bloodshot, constantly glancing over his shoulder. I didn't know, he began without greeting. About the pension funds. I swear, Martina, they told me I was being brought in for standard succession planning. Why are you telling me this? He swallowed hard. Because last night, 2 men came to my apartment asking questions about you, about what you might have seen beyond the pension accounts. A chill ran through me. What men? They didn't introduce themselves, he said bitterly, but they knew things, details about the system architecture that weren't public. They were professional, scary professional. What did you tell them? That I knew nothing, which is the truth. He leaned closer. Martina, this isn't just about corporate fraud anymore. The government contracts, the overseas connections. I think you've stumbled onto something much bigger. I contacted Director Hollister immediately after leaving Braxton. She arranged protective surveillance without hesitation. A precaution, not a cause for alarm, she assured me. That night, I couldn't sleep. Had I truly understood what I was exposing? Or had I simply pulled one thread of a much larger tapestry? The next morning brought clarity in the form of a front-page newspaper story. Financial fraud investigation uncovers links to international money laundering operation. The article detailed how my whistleblowing had inadvertently exposed connections between the pension fraud and a sophisticated global network moving billions through shell companies. Senior government officials in 2 countries had already resigned. Financial regulators worldwide were launching coordinated investigations. 1 month after my termination, I testified before a congressional committee investigating corporate pension fraud. Cameras flashed as I described discovering the irregularities and being fired for my persistence. The committee chair called me a profile in corporate courage. The media narrative transformed me from terminated employee to folk hero, the system architect who brought down a criminal enterprise. Interview requests flooded in. A major publisher offered a book deal. A prominent university asked me to give their commencement address. I declined most offers. uncomfortable with the spotlight. But I did accept Director Hollister's job offer, with one condition: I would work as an independent consultant, maintaining my freedom to choose my projects and speak publicly about corporate accountability. 6 months later, I stood in a federal courtroom watching Lennox and the remaining executives enter their guilty pleas. Their expensive suits had been replaced with subdued business attire, their arrogance with defeated expressions. When Lennox glanced up and saw me watching, something flashed in his eyes, recognition that his downfall had come not from a grand conspiracy or sophisticated sting operation, but from a woman he'd underestimated. A woman he'd laughed about firing while planning to steal from thousands of innocent people. The judge's sentencing was unsparing. 15 years for Lennox, slightly less for the others. Financial restitution in the millions. The complete dismantling of their personal wealth. The court views these crimes with particular severity, the judge stated. The defendants abused positions of extraordinary trust to enrich themselves at the expense of working people who spent decades building this company. As Lennox was led away in handcuffs, he stopped briefly beside me. "You've destroyed everything," he said, voice barely audible. I met his gaze steadily. "No, you did that yourself. I just removed the barriers that hid it." That evening, I visited the company's headquarters, my first time returning since being escorted out. The building looked the same, but everything inside had changed. New leadership, new protocols, new transparency measures that ensured no one could ever again divert funds without multiple levels of oversight. The system I had built now served its true purpose, protecting the financial security of thousands rather than the criminal activities of a few. My revenge wasn't in destroying something, but in restoring it to what it should have been all along. In my new office at the Financial Crimes Task Force, I kept a single memento from my previous job, the company mug they'd given me instead of a proper raise. Inside it, I placed the business card of the federal prosecutor who had thanked me for my courage. Not everyone gets to see justice served so completely in their lifetime. Not everyone who stands up against corruption lives to witness its unraveling. But that day in the courtroom, watching those who had dismissed me face the consequences of their actions, I realized the most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's restoration. Setting things right, creating systems where truth can't be buried and exploitation can't be hidden. If you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or pushed aside by those who thought their power made them untouchable, I hope my story gives you strength. Sometimes justice requires simply removing the artificial barriers that hide the truth. If you found value in this journey, please hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of corporate accountability. Your comments mean everything. They remind us all that speaking truth to power matters, even when the cost seems too high. Remember, the most dangerous person in any room isn't the one with the most authority. It's the one with the most integrity. We need to discuss your position at the center, Avery. My boss wouldn't meet my eyes, his gaze fixed on the stack of papers before him. My wife has raised concerns about the direction of our raptor rehabilitation program. Concerns? Our release rates are up 62% this year. We've saved species other centers couldn't. It's not about results. It's about approach. He cleared his throat. Marissa feels you're too rigid with protocols. 2. Controlling over who interacts with the animals. You mean because I wouldn't let her pose with the injured hawk for social media? Or when I stopped her from feeding cake to the barred owl? She's made a substantial donation. The board feels she deserves more input. So, what exactly are you saying? The knot in my chest tightened. We're restructuring. You'll be handling basic care duties: cleaning, feeding. Marissa's cousin Jenny will take over the Raptor program. Jenny? She's been volunteering for 3 months. She doesn't know the first thing about that. The decision's final. He slid a paper across the desk. Your new salary and position. I need your signature. I stared at the paper, blood rushing in my ears. A 40% pay cut. 4 years of building this program from nothing, developing techniques that had saved countless birds of prey, all of it handed to someone whose qualification was being related to the woman who'd married wealth. What if I refuse? Then I'll accept your resignation, effective immediately. 2 weeks later, I watched helplessly as the golden eagle we'd spent months rehabilitating died under Jenny's care. She'd missed critical signs I would have caught instantly. As I stood over its magnificent body, something inside me broke, then hardened into resolve. I walked out that day, leaving behind everything I'd built. What I didn't know then was that I wasn't just walking away from a job. I was walking toward becoming someone that Marissa would one day regret crossing. If you're enjoying this story of betrayal and what comes next, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to hear how this unfolds. Trust me, what happens when she walks into my office thinking she's getting a job interview? Worth every second. My name is Avery Kincaid, and until that moment in my boss's office, I'd never considered myself particularly ambitious. Animals were my passion, not power. I'd grown up on the outskirts of Pinewood, a rural town surrounded by expansive forests and wetlands. As a child, I spent more time nursing injured sparrows back to health than playing with other kids. By 22, I'd earned my degree in wildlife biology and started as an entry-level caretaker at Wilderness Revival Center. Within 4 years, I'd developed such effective rehabilitation techniques for birds of prey that centers across the country began asking for my protocols. The director, Cameron, initially supported my work enthusiastically. We were making breakthroughs in raptor rehabilitation that were gaining national attention. The center's reputation soared, bringing in donations and grants. Then Marissa appeared at a fundraising gala. She wore a dress that cost more than my yearly salary and had the laugh of someone who'd never worried about paying rent. Cameron fell instantly, proposing after just 3 months. I was happy for him until she started showing up at the center, critiquing everything from our facilities to our methods. "Wouldn't it be darling to have visitors bottle feed the fawns?" she suggested one afternoon, ignoring my explanation about habituation risks. "These animals aren't pets," I reminded her. "Our goal is release, not socialization." Her smile remained, but her eyes changed. "Of course, Avery, you're the expert." The trouble began in earnest after she contributed $200,000 with the stipulation that she would take an active role in center operations. Cameron was elated. The center needed the money. I tried to be accommodating, teaching her basics of wildlife care, but her interest wasn't in learning, it was in control. The incident with the red-tailed hawk became our breaking point. We'd spent weeks healing its fractured wing when Marissa brought friends to see her rehabilitation center. "I want to hold it for a quick photo," she announced, reaching for the hawk's enclosure. I stepped between her and the cage. "That's not possible. Stress could reverse weeks of progress." "Don't be ridiculous. It'll only take a minute." "No, I'm sorry, but absolutely not." Her smile disappeared. "You work for this center. I fund this center. I work for these animals." 2 days later, I was demoted. The first month of cleaning cages instead of performing specialized care was humiliating. Staff who'd once sought my expertise now avoided eye contact. Jenny, with her 2-week crash course in raptor rehabilitation, began changing protocols I'd spent years developing. When the golden eagle died, I knew I couldn't stay. That night, I called Dr. Helen Lang, a veterinarian who'd referred injured wildlife to our center for years. "I quit today," I told her, voice hollow. "About time," she replied. "Have you heard Elaine Parker is retiring next month? Selling her small rehab property out by Lakeside? Someone with your skills could transform that place." The idea planted itself like a seed. Could I? The property would need massive upgrades. I had some savings, but nowhere near enough. Yet the alternative, watching everything I'd built crumble under incompetent hands, was unbearable. 3 weeks later, I signed the papers on Elaine's 5-acre property, using every penny of my savings plus a small business loan. The facility was little more than an outdated house with a barn and some makeshift enclosures. The first night, I slept on the floor of what would become my office, surrounded by boxes of supplies and equipment I'd purchased secondhand. Morning revealed the enormity of what I'd undertaken. The enclosures needed rebuilding. The treatment room was decades out of date, and I was alone, without staff, regular funding, or even proper running water in the barn. I woke before dawn and worked until I couldn't stand. Every enclosure I rebuilt, every wall I painted, every protocol I wrote, I did it with Marissa's dismissive smile burned into my memory. 3 months in, living on instant noodles and determination, I got my first significant case, a bald eagle with lead poisoning, brought in by a park ranger who'd heard I worked miracles with raptors. The truth was less magical, just specialized knowledge and obsessive attention to detail. Wilderness Revival couldn't take it? I asked as we transferred the magnificent bird to a treatment space. They've had some problems recently, he replied carefully. State inspection found some concerns. Your name came up from several wildlife officers. I said nothing, but inside, a small flame of vindication flickered. The eagle survived against odds. A local wildlife photographer documented its recovery and release, images that traveled far beyond our rural community. A small conservation magazine ran a feature on my innovative habitat-specific recovery spaces. Donations began trickling in, not Marissa-level money, but enough to hire an assistant, then a part-time veterinary technician. By month 6, we'd become the primary wildlife rehabilitation center for 3 counties. I hired a coordinator to handle incoming calls and paperwork. We weren't just surviving, we were thriving. That's when the email arrived. Avery, we have an interesting application, my coordinator said, stepping into my office. Someone with extensive wildlife center experience according to her resume. Marissa Peterson? I froze, staring at the printed resume she held out. There, in elegant typography, was the name of the woman who'd destroyed everything I'd built. The woman who'd had me demoted because I wouldn't let her endanger animals for social media content. Says here she was the Associate Director of Rehabilitation Programs at Wilderness Revival. My coordinator raised an eyebrow. Wasn't that your old place? I took the resume, scanning its contents with growing disbelief. According to this document, Marissa had overseen rehabilitation protocols, managed staff, and developed community education programs. Reality couldn't have been further from this fiction. What's the position she's applying for? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Operations manager. We did post that opening last week. The position would report directly to me, overseeing daily functions of the center. The perfect role for someone with actual experience, not someone who'd invented a fantasy career on paper. Why would she apply here? I murmured, more to myself than my coordinator. She must not know I own this place. Want me to reject it? We have other qualified candidates. So, I stared at the phone number on the resume, memories flooding back. The golden eagle that died needlessly, the humiliation of cleaning cages after years of specialized work, the nights spent sleeping on the floor of this very building while trying to create something new from nothing. A plan began forming in my mind. No, I said finally. Schedule an interview, but don't tell her who she'll be meeting with. My coordinator raised an eyebrow. You sure? Based on your reaction, there seems to be history there. History is putting it mildly, I said, handing back the resume. Schedule her for tomorrow afternoon if possible, and let's keep my ownership unlisted in any correspondence. That night, I barely slept. My mind raced with questions. What had happened at Wilderness Revival since I'd left? Why would Marissa, a woman who'd used her husband's position and her own wealth to demote me, suddenly need employment? And at my center of all places, the ranger's comment about problems at my former workplace took on new significance. I'd been so focused on building my own center that I'd paid little attention to news about Wilderness Revival. A quick online search revealed concerning headlines: local wildlife center under investigation, state authorities question care standards at rehabilitation facility. I dug deeper, finding an article from just 3 weeks prior. Wilderness Revival Center director steps down amid controversy. There was Cameron's photo, looking haggard as he left the building. The article mentioned financial irregularities and substandard care protocols resulting in preventable animal deaths. No specific mention of Marissa, but reading between the lines, it wasn't hard to guess what had happened. They'd lost their funding. The center that had once been the crown jewel of regional wildlife rehabilitation was collapsing. And now Marissa, who'd never worked a day in wildlife care despite what her resume claimed, was desperate enough to apply at a small, rural facility she'd never heard of. The next morning, I dressed with unusual care. Not formally, we were a wildlife center, after all, but I chose my most professional field clothes and the jacket I reserved for donor meetings. My staff noticed. Special visitor today? Asked Talia, my rehabilitation assistant, as she prepared medications for our current patients. You could say that, I replied, checking my watch. 2 hours until the interview. I spent those hours in a strange state of anticipation, walking the grounds of what we now called Second Chance Wildlife Center. What had started as a rundown property was now something I felt genuine pride in. Our enclosures were thoughtfully designed for each species' recovery needs. The medical treatment room contained equipment I'd only dreamed of having at Wilderness Revival. We'd recently completed construction on specialized aquatic rehabilitation tanks for water birds. Everything here I'd built from nothing. After being stripped of my position and program at Wilderness Revival, I'd created something better. The knowledge gave me a steadiness I hadn't expected to feel. At precisely 2 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from our front desk. "Your appointment has arrived." I settled behind my desk, a simple but sturdy oak piece I'd refinished myself during those early sleepless nights, and nodded to my coordinator. "Send her in." The door opened, and there she was. Marissa Peterson looked different than when I'd last seen her. The designer clothes had been replaced with a reasonable but clearly new outfit purchased for interviews. Her usually perfect hair showed signs of more economical styling. But her expression, that was entirely new. Gone was the smug superiority, replaced with the tight smile of someone trying desperately to appear confident while feeling anything but. That expression shifted to shock the moment she saw me. "Avery?" She stopped mid-step, one foot literally hovering above the floor. "I didn't realize this was your place. Please, have a seat," I said, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. Professional, calm, nothing in my tone betrayed the complex emotions churning beneath. She hesitated, then slowly lowered herself into the chair, hands clutched tightly around her designer purse. "Likely a remnant from better days. Your resume claims extensive experience in wildlife rehabilitation management," I said, glancing down at the paper before me. "Tell me about that." She straightened, falling back on practiced poise. "Yes, well, at Wilderness Revival, I oversaw the rehabilitation programs, developing care protocols and managing staff schedules." "Interesting," I said, letting the word hang between us. "Which specific rehabilitation techniques did you implement for avian botulism cases?" Her eyes widened slightly. I delegated those technical decisions to staff with specialized training. And what's your approach to treating lead poisoning in bald eagles?" "That would depend on the severity of the case." She shifted in her seat. "What severity markers would you look for specifically?" She swallowed. "I'd consult with the veterinarian on the appropriate treatment path." For 15 excruciating minutes, I asked pointed technical questions that anyone with actual wildlife rehabilitation experience could answer. With each vague response, her composure cracked further. "What would you do?" I asked finally. "If a staff member disagreed with your approach to treating an injured animal?" "I would remind them who's in charge," she replied, a flash of the old Marissa emerging. "That's not the correct answer when someone else might have expertise you lack," I said evenly. She looked away, her facade crumbling entirely. "The center is failing," she admitted quietly. "Everyone says it's because you left. We've been blacklisted by several conservation groups." "What happened?" I asked, genuine curiosity mixing with my other emotions. "After you left, things fell apart slowly at first. The raptor program. Jenny couldn't handle it. More birds died. Then the deer began showing signs of stress-related illnesses. The state inspection found multiple violations. And Cameron?" Her shoulders sagged. "He tried to fix things, but our major donors pulled out after the inspection report went public. We invested our personal savings trying to keep it afloat, but," she gestured helplessly, "he resigned last month. We're selling our house." I let this sink in. The center that had pushed me out was collapsing. The couple who demoted me were facing financial ruin. The revenge fantasy I might have harbored 6 months ago had manifested without my lifting a finger. "We need someone for basic facility maintenance and food preparation," I said after a long pause. "Minimum wage, weekend shifts. You would report to my rehabilitation assistant, Talia, who's 20 years younger than you but has been rehabilitating wildlife since high school." Her face flushed deep red. "That's absurd. I have administrative experience. In fundraising, perhaps. But our reputation is built on proper animal care, which begins with understanding every aspect, including the parts that aren't Instagram-worthy." She stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. "I don't need this. I didn't know this was your center, or I never would have applied. Why did you claim to have done my job on your resume?" She froze, hand on the doorknob. "I needed work. Cameron's reputation is ruined in the conservation community. My family won't help us. They never approved of him anyway. Do you have any idea what it's like to lose everything overnight?" The irony of her question hung in the air between us. "Actually," I said quietly, "I do." She left without another word. That evening, as I made my rounds checking on our patients, I felt strangely hollow. The confrontation I'd anticipated for months hadn't brought the satisfaction I'd expected. Seeing Marissa humbled should have felt like victory. Instead, it left me contemplating the thin line between justice and vengeance. 3 days later, my phone rang with an unfamiliar number. "Is this Avery Kincaid?" a man's voice asked when I answered. "Speaking. This is Robert Winters, board chairman at Wilderness Revival Center." He cleared his throat uncomfortably. "I'm calling because we're in a difficult position. Our center is at risk of permanent closure following recent challenges." "I'm aware of the situation," I replied neutrally. "Yes, well, your name has come up repeatedly as we've consulted with wildlife authorities about how to address our problems. Your rehabilitation techniques, particularly for raptors, were apparently exceptional." I said nothing, waiting. "The board has removed Cameron Peterson as director, and we're seeking new leadership, someone with proven expertise and integrity. We'd like to discuss the possibility of you returning as director." My heart pounded in my chest. The position I'd never even dared dream of before my demotion was now being offered outright. Running Wilderness Revival would mean a larger facility, more resources, greater impact for the animals I cared about. "What about the financial situation?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "We've secured temporary emergency funding from the State Conservation Department, conditional upon new leadership and proven rehabilitation protocols." "Your protocols, specifically." I thought of my small center, the struggles, the late nights, the pride of building something from nothing. Then I thought of Wilderness Revival's resources, the good that could be done there under proper leadership. "I'd need to consider it carefully," I said. "My current center." "Of course," he interrupted. "Take the weekend, but we need an answer by Monday if we're going to save the center." After ending the call, I sat in silence, watching through my office window as a rehabilitated Cooper's hawk tested its wings in our largest flight enclosure. Tomorrow, it would be released back into the wild, another success story. The offer churned in my mind as I completed my evening rounds. Return to Wilderness Revival as director. The ultimate professional vindication. Everything I'd worked toward before Marissa entered the picture. As I checked on our newest patient, a young bobcat hit by a car, my phone buzzed with a text message. "Cameron, heard the board reached out. Please consider their offer. I know I don't deserve your help after what happened, but the animals do. And Marissa is no longer involved, I promise." I slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding, my thoughts in turmoil. The decision ahead felt weighted with implications beyond my professional future. It was about who I wanted to be, someone defined by past injuries, or someone defined by moving forward. The next morning, I arrived early at Second Chance. The sun was just cresting the tree line, casting long shadows across our carefully constructed enclosures. In the quiet morning light, I walked the grounds, mentally cataloging everything we'd built in 6 short months. My phone rang again. Robert Winters. Apparently, he couldn't wait until Monday. "Miss Kincaid, I apologize for calling on the weekend, but there's been a development. The state inspection team is giving us one final opportunity to demonstrate viability before they permanently revoke our rehabilitation license. They're visiting Wednesday." "That's very soon," I replied. "Yes, which is why we need your answer today. If you accept the director position, they'll take that into consideration. Your reputation carries significant weight." The pressure of the decision pressed down on me. Walking back to my office, I passed Talia, treating a barred owl we'd admitted yesterday. "Morning, boss," she called cheerfully, his wings looking better already. I paused, watching her gentle, competent movements. 6 months ago, she'd been a talented but inexperienced volunteer. Now she could handle complex cases independently. I'd built not just a facility, but a team. As I continued toward my office, my coordinator waved me over to her desk. The family who brought in that fawn last month stopped by. They left this. She handed me a child's drawing of a deer with the wobbly handwritten words, "Thank you for saving her. I pinned the drawing to our already crowded bulletin board of similar tokens, tangible reminders of the community we'd built around Second Chance. Sitting at my desk, I stared at my phone, Cameron's text still unanswered, Robert Winters awaiting my call. The decision before me wasn't simply about career advancement or vindication. It was about what truly mattered to me and to the animals we served. I picked up the phone and dialed. Mr. Winters, I've made my decision. I appreciate the offer, I told Mr. Winters, but I'm declining the director position. Silence stretched across the line before he responded. I don't understand. This is an extraordinary opportunity, the very center where you built your reputation. A center that chose to dismantle my program and demote me when it became inconvenient. I replied, surprised by the calm in my voice. I've built something here that matters to me. We can match whatever salary you're making. Exceed it, likely. It's not about money. Then what is it about? Spite? Revenge against Cameron and Marissa? They're no longer involved. It's about integrity, I interrupted. When animals were being mistreated, your board did nothing. When experienced staff raised concerns, you sided with donors over expertise. Why would I leave a center I built on proper principles to rescue one that abandoned them? Without your help, Wilderness Revival will close permanently. I paused, considering his words. The center's closure would mean dozens of animals in the region would have nowhere to go for rehabilitation. Despite everything, I couldn't let that happen. I won't take the director position, I said finally, but I have a counter-proposal. Second Chance Wildlife can absorb Wilderness Revival's rehabilitation program. Absorb? I don't follow. We take over operations of your facility as a satellite location of Second Chance. Your board provides the property and remaining assets. We provide the expertise and management. Your center keeps its name for continuity with donors, but comes under our operational umbrella. That's unconventional. So is watching a once-respected wildlife center collapse because of poor management decisions. This preserves rehabilitation services in your area while ensuring proper protocols are followed. The board would need to vote. They have until Monday. After that, my offer expires. After ending the call, I sat back in my chair, heart racing despite my outwardly calm demeanor. Had I just turned down the position I'd once dreamed of? Yes. Had I then proposed essentially taking over the center that had pushed me out? Also, yes. My phone buzzed with a text from Cameron. The board chairman called me. Is your counter-offer serious? I replied simply, entirely. Throughout the weekend, I distracted myself with work, treating patients, revising care protocols, training volunteers. By Sunday evening, I'd nearly convinced myself the board would reject my proposal. Why would they hand operational control to the person they'd once demoted? Monday morning, my phone rang as I was examining a recovering red fox. The board voted unanimously to accept your proposal. Robert Winters announced without preamble. We're prepared to draw up the necessary legal agreements immediately. Within 2 weeks, Second Chance Wildlife Center had officially expanded to include what was now called Wilderness Revival Campus. I appointed Talia as the on-site manager, implementing our care protocols while I split my time between locations. We retained most of the staff, but instituted mandatory retraining in proper rehabilitation techniques. Word spread quickly through the wildlife conservation community. Rehabilitation centers in neighboring states reached out for guidance on our protocols. Grant applications that had been rejected when Wilderness Revival was under investigation were now approved with our management team listed. 3 months after the merger, I arrived at the Wilderness Revival campus for a routine visit. The transformation was remarkable. Animals receiving proper care, staff working with renewed purpose, volunteers eager to learn correct techniques. As I walked the grounds, I passed Cameron's former office, now converted to additional treatment space. Avery? A voice called from behind me. I turned to find Cameron standing awkwardly by the entrance. He looked thinner, his normally impeccable clothes slightly worn. Cameron, I didn't know you were visiting today. I'm not, officially. He gestured vaguely. I wanted to see how things were going. Things are going well. The rehabilitation program is back on track. He nodded, looking around at the center he'd once directed. The board told me about your management. Everyone says you've accomplished in 3 months what should have taken a year. We had a solid foundation to build on, I said diplomatically. Your staff just needed proper guidance. And Marissa's involvement was the problem. He stated it plainly, not as a question. I said nothing, letting the silence speak for itself. She's moving back east, he continued after a moment, living with her parents while the divorce finalizes. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? He gave a bitter laugh. After what she did to you? Marriage's ending is never something to celebrate, regardless of circumstances. He studied me, confusion evident in his expression. You could have demanded my permanent removal from the center as part of your takeover. You could have publicized what happened, how we treated you. Instead, I hear you've listed me as a founding contributor in grant applications. Revenge wasn't my goal, Cameron. Then what was? I considered his question carefully. Creating something that works, something that serves these animals properly, something built on expertise rather than ego. He looked away, unable to hold my gaze. The board mentioned you might consider bringing me back in a limited advisory capacity. Is that true? Yes. Your knowledge of the center's history and donor relationships could be valuable, as long as you understand that rehabilitation decisions stay with those qualified to make them. I understand. He hesitated. Thank you, Avery. Not many people would offer a second chance after what happened. I smiled slightly at his unintentional echo of my center's name. Second chances are literally what we do here. After he left, I continued my rounds, checking on each patient with the thoroughness that had become our trademark. In the raptor section, I paused before an enclosure housing a red-tailed hawk, the same species Marissa had once wanted to use as a photo prop. This particular hawk had been rescued after a territorial dispute with another raptor left it with a damaged wing. Initial assessments suggested it might never fly again, but under our care, it had defied expectations. Tomorrow, it would be released back into the wild, another success story that would have been impossible under the previous management. As I made notes on its final assessment, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Local wildlife center gains national recognition for innovative rehabilitation techniques. The article highlighted Second Chance's expansion and our dramatic improvement of the struggling Wilderness Revival facility. 6 months ago, I'd slept on a cot in an unheated office, wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Now I headed a thriving 2-campus wildlife rehabilitation organization that was setting standards across the state. The following week, I received an unexpected email from Marissa's lawyer, requesting permission to retrieve personal items she'd left at Wilderness Revival. I approved it without hesitation, instructing staff to provide whatever assistance she needed. On the designated day, I happened to be on site when she arrived. She stopped short upon seeing me, the confident facade completely gone. "I didn't expect you to be here," she said quietly. "Just checking on some patients," I replied. "Staff will help you find your belongings." She nodded, then hesitated. "I heard what you've done with the place. The rehabilitation statistics are impressive. That's what happens when animal welfare drives decisions." She looked around at the bustling center, and staff moving purposefully. Volunteers engaged in meaningful work, animals receiving proper care. "You've built something remarkable," she admitted. "Something I never could have." "It wasn't about competing with you, Marissa. Wasn't it, even a little?" A ghost of her former sharpness surfaced. "You must have felt some satisfaction taking over the center after what happened." I considered her question honestly. The satisfaction comes from seeing these animals thrive, from knowing our work matters. That's a kind of success money can't buy and social status can't provide. She absorbed this, something shifting in her expression. "I never understood what made you different. Why everyone respected you despite your lack of connections." "It was never about me," I said simply. "It was always about them." I gestured toward the recovery enclosures visible through the window. After collecting her things, Marissa paused at the door. "What you've created here, it's what the center always should have been." As she walked away, I realized the true nature of my revenge wasn't in her humiliation or in taking over the center that had pushed me out. It was in building something so undeniably excellent that even those who had undervalued me were forced to recognize what they'd thrown away. 1 year to the day after my demotion, I stood watching as we released a bald eagle, our 100th successful raptor rehabilitation since the merger. As it soared into the open sky, wings strong and sure, I felt a sense of completion that no corner office or prestigious title could have provided. The ultimate revenge wasn't in tearing down what had hurt me. It was in rising so far above it that looking back no longer held any power. If you've been moved by Avery's journey from betrayal to triumph, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe for more stories of resilience and unexpected justice. Share in the comments what you would have done in Avery's position. Would you have taken over the center that pushed you out, or built something entirely new? Your experiences with workplace betrayal might help others facing similar challenges find their own path forward.